Welcome to Season 3 of Public Health on Call, a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. I'm Josh Sharfstein, Vice Dean for Public Health Practice and Community Engagement and a former Secretary of Maryland's Health Department. Our goal is to bring scientific evidence and experience to the public health news of the day through informative interviews with scientists, community leaders, policy experts, public health officials, clinicians, and more. If you have ideas or questions for us to cover, please email us at publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Smith-Rogers, producer of Public Health on Call. This week, the FDA paused the use of Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine because of reports of 6 women under 50 who developed a rare form of blood clots called cerebral venous sinus thrombosis. Today, Stephanie Desmond talks with Dr. Josh Sharfstein about what this means for vaccine rollouts, vaccine hesitancy, and what might happen next. This bonus episode has been lifted from yesterday's Facebook Live, which can be seen at facebook.com/JohnsHopkinsSPH. Let's listen.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Desmond, the co-host of Public Health on Call, and today I'm talking with former FDA official Josh Sharfstein. The FDA paused the use of the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine this week because of reports of 6 women under 50 who developed a rare form of blood clot called cerebral venous sinus thrombosis. Can you please walk us through where we are right now?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Stephanie. As you know, I'm also a co-host of Public Health on Call. These concerning cases were identified through the surveillance of vaccine safety in the United States, and FDA and CDC announced that they would recommend a pause in vaccinating until more was understood. And so right now they're in the process of gathering more information, trying to understand, for example, what the true rate of this very rare but potentially serious complication is for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Why not just warn people that there could be this potential issue? Why pause administering the test? The vaccine?
I think one of the reasons is that the CDC and FDA want to get the best clinical recommendations for the medical community to know if you see this, what to do. And so they're in the process of pulling that together. The other is, the essence of a warning is telling people the best information. And so I think part of the logic is let's figure out the best information. Let's take a few days, look at the data, see how common this is, and if they're going to, resume vaccinating, give people the benefit of that analysis.
Mm-hmm. The 19-year-old daughter of a really good friend of mine got her J&J vaccine over the weekend. Should people like her who have already been vaccinated, should they be concerned? What should they be looking out for?
Well, I think it's important to realize that this is a very rare side effect. Precisely how rare, they're working on figuring that out, but it's very rare. So for any individual to have this problem would be quite unusual. At the same time, there are certain things to be looking out for. A very severe headache, trouble breathing, unusual leg pain. Those are some of the symptoms that the CDC has said people should seek medical attention for and say, hey, I just got vaccinated in the last week or two. It looks like the potential danger period is really only a couple weeks. People who've been vaccinated before that really don't need to worry.
Mm-hmm. And how can someone report an adverse effect? Is that something that happens if I went to get treated, or is that something that happens that I would do myself?
People can report. I think there's a website for the vaccine adverse event reporting system, and certainly doctors and hospitals report all the time.
Mm-hmm. So these blood clots were also seen in some cases of folks who got the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is not approved in the U.S., but was given all across Europe. And I understand that the AstraZeneca vaccine and the J&J vaccine are very similar. Can you talk about that and whether there's a link?
Sure. So that's certainly a question that's come up because both the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine use the adenovirus vector. Basically, they're modifying a common cold virus to deliver the vaccine to you versus the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, for example, which is an mRNA vaccine, a very different type of approach and a different set of ingredients, essentially. So because this very rare and unusual kind of blood clot was found both with AstraZeneca and with Johnson & Johnson, it's raised the natural question of, could this be due to the adenovirus vector? And that's something that is one of the questions I'm sure the CDC and FDA are looking at carefully.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing a lot of criticism online, not from doctors, not from people like you who are public health officials, who are saying this is an overreaction and will increase the mistrust in an already challenging situation of getting enough people vaccinated. How do you react to that? And also, how do you think this could impact this vaccine hesitancy issue?
It's a really good question, and I'm sure this is a difficult decision for both the CDC and the FDA because even though these are concerning cases, they're very, very rare, and I think it's pretty clear that the benefits of the vaccine still outweigh the risks. So, why take a pause? And I think part of the logic here is to be able to gather information to have good recommendations for people so they can make their own decision and good ideas for the clinical community if they see a complication, how to take care of the patient. So this is, for the purpose of better managing this situation. And at the same time, I think a secondary benefit is that it really signals how seriously these agencies are taking safety. And, you in public health, as in life, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And the impression here is we take safety seriously. And as a result, you're not vulnerable to the thought that maybe they don't really care that there might be some people getting very sick. Actually, the agencies care a lot, and they're doing everything they can to figure out what's going on and give good advice to people and clinicians.
Do you worry, though, that sort of an unintended consequence could be that people are now more afraid than before of COVID vaccines?
Well, look, if this is a real, rare, but real adverse effect, then that is going to make people wonder. And so then those people who have questions, the key issue is, do they trust the public health agencies to do a good job investigating and figuring out what to do? I don't think, I'm sure we would all prefer a world where this wasn't a question at all. But now that it is a question, the idea is, how are we going to handle it responsibly? And can we trust that the agencies that are responsible for safety are going to do a good job? And I think in that regard, the fact that there's a pause is a signal to people that safety is very much a priority. And the information that will come from this will be the highest quality information for people to make good decisions.
Mm-hmm. So the J&J vaccines don't need the kind of refrigeration that the other vaccines do, and they've been given to students and shift workers and rural residents and other people who are hard to reach. Could this situation exacerbate the equity issues that we're having?
Well, I think that we're going to have to see. First, within a few days, I think we'll have a better sense of where things are heading with this particular vaccine, whether or not they return to using it with better information for people, whether they recommend for certain groups maybe to use the other vaccines. I don't think that this one vaccine, which is a very small share of all the vaccines in the United States, was the key to equity. It doesn't get anyone off the hook for making sure that there's a lot of outreach to communities. There's a lot of patience in answering people's questions. I mean, all those things are going to be really important. The great news, and what in part makes this pause understandable, is that there are two other vaccines that have not been associated with this rare but serious, effect. And so there are going to be plenty of options, and the equity responsibilities are going to be with those vaccines in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. And you did mention sort of certain groups. So I guess it's possible that the regulatory agencies could come back and say, well, we studied this and we think that women between the ages of 18 and 48 shouldn't receive it. I mean, because it could be a recommendation like that, I guess.
Something like that. I mean, if you look at the AstraZeneca vaccine in Europe, you see a variety of different country responses. The United Kingdom has continued to vaccinate everybody with the AstraZeneca vaccine, but other countries have said younger people should not get that vaccine and get the other vaccines, but are absolutely finding no problem vaccinating older adults. And then some countries, I think, have said, we don't want the AstraZeneca vaccine. So you see how people or these countries are taking different positions. I think, it's going to be very important for the United States to really look at the data, make a decision, and explain it well, because it will have important implications for this country and eventually around the world.
And that was really going to be my next question was, so while you, as you said, the J&J vaccine is not a huge percentage of the campaigns that are happening in the United States, around the world, they were really counting on this vaccine to for the reasons I mentioned earlier, that it doesn't need the kind of refrigeration that the other vaccines do. I know that many parts of the world were counting on this. Will there be global implications? Or I guess it just depends on what we see coming the next couple days.
Well, already there are some, global implications from the fact that there has been, these cases have been identified, and we're going to have to keep that in mind. I mean, there is just such an urgent need for global vaccination, and these vaccines do play a big role. But, we may need to pivot. So, it's one step at a time here. I think having a good decision, not necessarily the most risk-averse decision, but a good, explainable decision that people can understand is very important here. And I think that will be the basis of what needs to happen in people's understanding of how these vaccines can be used around the world, too.
Josh Sharfstein, thank you so much for walking us through this. It's been really valuable.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. Good to see you. Public Health on Call is produced by Josh Sharfstein, Lindsay Smith-Rogers, and Stephanie Desmond. Audio production by Spencer Greer, Niall Owen McCusker, C.N. Oates, and Matthew Martin, with support from Chip Hickey. Distribution by Nick Moran. Production support from Catherine Ricardo and Neiman Outland. Social media support from Brenda Haggader, Grace Holes Fernandez, and Caroline Wong. Thank you for listening.